What we're going to do today is look at a scenario in relation to TET and SPOD and how we can use open data to actually examine a real-life situation in terms of decision making at a local level in the city of Dublin. So here we are. First of all, we are looking at TET, and what we want to do is have a look at a data set which is to do with public spending in the city of Dublin. So what we type in is Dublin spending. Now this forms part of a scenario where we're going to examine whether we can use mopeds, which we saw in Taipei, to run alongside the existing Dublin bike scheme, which includes bicycles which people can use simply by putting in their credit card and taking the bikes from one bicycle stand to another around the city of Dublin. So first of all, what we're going to look at is how we can take this Dublin City Council spending information and check out what sort of spending has been put in place in previous years. So if we click on that, Dublin City Council spending and revenue budget for 2014, what we want to see is we want to see the tabular version. You'll notice here that there's a basic visualization of the data, but if we look down below, we'll see the tabular version of the data by clicking on this button, which is the table button, and its view as table is what it says if we highlight it. So let me do that, and down below we'll see the data appearing. So if we look down on the left hand side, we'll see that there's code description, adopted and estimated, and we want to expand the description slightly so we can see what it actually says. Okay, the figures are fine, and we have the ID on the left hand side, and if we look down at number 18, we'll see traffic improvement measures, and for 2014 there weren't any traffic improvement measures. So what that actually presumably says is that the traffic didn't improve during 2014. But what we want to do is examine the scenario whereby traffic will improve over the coming years. And so we're going to visualize this by taking this information into SPOD. And how we do that is there is a link, an API link that we've put in place in TET. We simply click on the button beside the URL, and then we go into SPOD, and what we want to do is we want to go to MySpace and we want to import that information. So what we do is we click on the plus button down at the bottom. Okay, and up come these three different icons, and the one that we want to choose is Create Datalet. Okay, this will bring up another screen, and you'll see at the bottom of that screen it says Selected URL. So we simply click on that and then paste into that space. We paste the URL that we gathered in the previous in TET. So you'll see at the top right hand corner of the screen there's an arrow key, and at this point in time we simply click that arrow and it brings us forward. And what that's actually done is something very clever. It's brought in the 4 columns. If we just go back briefly to TET, we'll see that the 4 columns are code description, adopted and estimated, and coming back to SPOD, that's what it's brought in. So we'll highlight all of those because we want to use all of that data in this particular visualization. So we click it. Once we've highlighted those, we click the arrow again, and this brings us across to the different types of chart, and we can give a title here which would be spending, for example, and then something like Dublin spending for the description. It's up to yourselves very much as to what you choose to actually call the graph. Okay, so this allows us to create a graph, and what we want to do is create a bar chart. I'm going to go down here because I'll choose a column chart. I think that's nicer for this particular representation. On the x-axis, we want to choose the description, and then on the y-axis we'll choose the adopted by council, and the secondary one we'll choose the sorry, I'm slow at clicking here. We choose the estimated by manager. So this very kindly produces a datalet, and if I click on the add button at the top part of the screen, that will present us with a datalet. And then simply clicking on the datalet itself, it shows us in more visual format the actual graph that we've just created. It's very quick and very simple and very easy to use. Again, you'll see here towards the middle of the screen the traffic improvement management. So that actually is the visualization of the figures we saw in TET. So this gives us the estimated figures for various things, such as local roads general maintenance works and the amount approved by the manager, which are generally the same, but in some cases there's a difference that we'll see here. So anyway, we've worked out in our scenario that the amount of money available in 2014 wasn't anything. So in order to achieve our traffic improvements, what we've got to do is put a case forward. So we want to look at different types of data. Now we've prepared a number of other data sets earlier. The first one is modes of travel. And once we look at modes of travel, it actually shows us what are the different modes of travel in the different local authority areas within the Dublin City region. And if we look at the most popular one, there's the first one, we'll see that in fact in Dublin City, that's the central part of Dublin, that most people travelled on foot. And we'll see that for the three local authority areas which are surrounding Dublin, the sort of commuter belt as it were, that obviously walking isn't such an option because they're further away. So people who live in the city centre tend to walk to work, whereas those who live, a few miles or kilometres outside the city, tend to travel in other means. And the most popular one for most of these is actually driving car. So the various other different forms of travel are quite important as well. But if you notice here, the bicycle option is actually quite popular in Dublin city centre as well. But we're looking to add a new one, which is the moped. So at the moment that's not on here. There's no moped. But if we add a selection of mopeds, it'll add another node to this particular graph. Okay, so what we want to do in order to achieve that is if we look at the census figures, we go to the census figures which are available as open data as well. We've created this graph using a similar method to the first one, and we'll see that the various different areas, for example this one here is hugely popular, Blanchardstown. There's been a huge increase in the growth of that area, and the number of people living in that area is very significant. So the census figures give us some sort of indication as to where, for example, we might cite particular examples or particular parks for these mopeds which we're putting in place. Now we also need to consider for this different types of public transport. So an example of this would be a map-based system. What this actually shows us is the light rail system for Dublin. So we can actually scan down through this and examine specific stops that are on the light rail system. For example, here we'd look at this particular stop, which is near Bluebell, which is part of Dublin City. And if we go right down, drill right down to where that actually is, we'll see is it suitable, and we'll see that there's actually parking spaces here at the moment, and some of those could potentially be allocated to the moped park. So that is a viable option. That particular one potentially is a viable option. It's near a Lewis station. People could then, they could come in from the city on the light rail and then hop on their moped, or the other way around. They could come in from outside the city to this particular stop and then take the moped into their place of work, depending on which made sense to them. So that gives us a certain level of information. And then finally what we'd look at is something which is rather important, which is the bike parks for the city, the existing bike parks. Because there's a great opportunity to co-locate bike parks with the mopeds that we're looking at. And again, we can drill down towards the individual bike parks and see the sort of opportunities available for siting a new, a new location for mopeds. We could share that. We could take up some of the existing bike space, of course, but because these would be slightly bigger, it's useful if there is some space. And we'll see in this particular case, near the Dublin City Council Fruit Market, there's actually parking there. Again, a section of that could be allocated by the city. That's city parking, so it could be allocated for the moped. So that's the sort of information we need. So you'll see what we've looked at is we've looked at the spending, we've looked at the actual physical locations of the various different sources. We've looked at the modes of travel, and we've also looked at the demographics in terms of how many people live in the various different parts of Dublin. And this information all leads us to being able to draw up a conclusion as to how viable the sort of policy that we're looking to put in place is, and it also leads us to drawing a conclusion as to where we should actually locate the sites. So this and other open data, which is also available, on the portal and by using these particular systems, allows us to really seriously interrogate the open data and provide tools which are, real added value in terms of visualization. And TET and SPOD actually allow us to do it in such a way that it's very quick, it's very simple to use, and once we get the hang of it, we literally can do the scenario that we've looked at here within a matter of just a few minutes, and that certainly allows us to open it up to all sorts of different people to use. So I think that's a good demonstration of a practical example of how TET and SPOD can be used to actually help us in terms of decision support and making a decision for the City of Dublin. Thank you.